Marco has always been fascinated by the universe, immense and mysterious with so many destinies. Yet amongst millions of stars, each person has their own place. He belonged amongst children. Working at a daycare makes him the happiest. He realized that astrophysics was just his passion, so he dropped out of college and devoted his time to doing what he loved, teaching kindergarten. One regular day at the kindergarten, his life is turned upside down when a beautiful woman walks in need of assistance to find an address, a deconsecrated church. For Marco, it is like thunderbolts coming from the sun. Until then, he had no idea what it was like to be spellbound by a gaze or a smile. Love at first sight. It always seemed so irrational to him. But Marco falls in love. That night as he sits at his laptop writing his feelings, the power goes out. It was his turn to pay the bill. His roommate, Mary, reminds him. They even had a cut-off notice this month. Marco has been missing in action lately. He hasn't been taking his share of duties at the house. He shares an apartment with 3 other people, Mary, Ivan, and Paolo. All 3 of them sneer at him at that moment. If he is becoming too hard to room with, maybe he should just leave. Marco storms off and Mary attempts to diffuse the heated argument. She had some clue what Marco's problem has been for a while. It has to do with love at first sight. After listening to Mary's hunch-based story, Paolo suggests she introduce Marco to one of her friends instead. That would help get Marco's thoughts away from the girl, which seems so obviously out of his league. Mary goes to answer the knock on the door then. It's Renato, Marco's father. Mary can't recognize him and tries to send him off, saying that they are in no need of buying a new vacuum cleaner or a music system. Renato admits that he wasn't there to sell anything. Rather, he wanted something else entirely. Marco sits at the bar he frequents, doodling in his notebook. Sandrone, the bartender there, tries to cheer him up with silly relationship advice. He's going on about some incident involving a scratch on his car and a girl apologizing, when Renato walks up to them. Patting Marco on the shoulder, he mentions that if Sandrone had been gentlemanly, that girl would have given him her number. Marco's father, Dr. Renato Sanino, is a renowned, highly sought-after plastic surgeon. Renato had hoped for Marco to be his perfect son. He had made Marco learn Mandarin at the age of 5 and inspired him to win the Davis Cup at 14. Passionate about tennis, Renato had always given Marco performance anxiety, never grasping the concept that Marco could never be exactly like him. A winner, undoubtedly, but also a shameless betrayer. In short, although Renato is Marco's father, he is chronologically immature. So it's safe to say Marco isn't too excited about his father coming to visit him. Marco asks Renato what he was doing there. Renato is there to perform the wonders of science on 2 ladies having midlife crises with their body image. He then inquires about Marco's thesis. This meant that he hasn't been talking to mom. Renato brings Marco back to his apartment. Feigning hunger, he prepares pretty much a feast for the 5 of them, even though there was literally nothing in their fridge. Then again, he had always been a quick thinker and could improvise at anything. He always cooked meals when they shared a roof. Marco's mom couldn't even boil eggs. Renato then goes around the table asking each of Marco's friends what they did for a living. Mary is a tattoo artist. She works at a tattoo salon downtown. Ivan, who is religiously busy eating, didn't bother to answer. Renato turns to Paolo. He is an actor. Well, he hasn't landed any theater or movie gigs yet, but he has been the star of some famous photo novels for teenagers. Mary tosses a love note that had come in the mail that day from one of Paolo's fans. He is famous among girls. Paolo counters that his fangirls pale in comparison to the guys Mary brings home. All of them combined would equal one single brain cell. Renato is reminded of Marco's mother at Paolo's mention. He remarks that the man she's marrying possesses the same no brain cells characteristic, not to mention the fact that he does curling for a living. The so-called sports, where a guy tosses a rock and the other sweeps the ice so it slides. Marco counters that it's an Olympic sport and also that he makes his mom happy. That's all that really matters. Unlike Renato, who always cheated on her, even with his mother's caretaker. Renato rebuffs the accusation as ancient. He only did it so that the girl would take better care of his mother. Marco has had enough of this conversation. He gets off the table, confronting his father about whether he is here due to some misplaced jealousy that he all of a sudden feels towards her. Renato doesn't know what jealousy is. He tells Marco that he's only concerned about an idiot curling player living in a house he has paid for. Marco storms off with the last remark that he is so much better than Renato. Mary apologizes on Marco's behalf. She tells Renato that he's having a hard time lately. Renato finds him sulking with a notebook in hand by the entrance to his apartment building. He questions him regarding the girl his friends have told Renato about. Marco does not like the idea. Renato tells him that he, being a nice, smart, good-looking guy, should not have any second thoughts about pursuing her. Marco suggests that Renato better focus on what he had come to Rome to do and leave Marco's issue to him. He'd be fine. The next day, Marco spots the girl as she steps out of a lecture at his university. She's amongst some girlfriends, and they are talking about someone called Unrequited. Marco musters all his courage and walks up to them, jumping into their conversation. He tells them that he could help them research Unrequited, who is not a popular choice. Neither of them pays any heed to what Marco has to say. Passing him a cursory glance, the girls walk away to work more at the library. Why did he do that? He does not even know who Louis de Ricard is. Why didn't he think of anything intelligent to say? A sophisticated quote, an intelligent comment. Why didn't he just introduce himself? The next morning, Marco wakes up to find his father geared up with the chalkboard standing in the middle of his living room. Ivan, Mary, and Paolo all sit like dexterous students around the kitchen table. Renato tells Marco that he and Marco's friends have noticed that he's been stressed out lately, so he is here to fix it. Although Marco doesn't place much trust in Renato, when it comes to ladies, he knows that Renato has some experience. Mary explains that Renato has been here for more than an hour, and he has a theory. Renato calls it a certainty more than theory, though. 10 rules to make her fall in love. Renato is going to teach him these rules that many men use, without even realizing it. And as brilliant as Marco is, he has little experience with love. Love, according to Renato, is not dictated by fate, as they've led us to believe. Love at first sight, sparks, violins. No, seduction is an exact science with precise rules to respect. And Renato is there to teach them to Marco. Marco is flabbergasted. It would be just his luck to be humiliated by his father, for the very thing he despises him for. Mary thinks it's worth a shot. Ivan tells him he has nothing to lose at it. Marco gives in, on one condition. They will not touch on the subject of his mom or her boyfriend. Renato neither agrees nor denies. He flamboyantly turns their attention back to the chalkboard, towards rule number 1. A hunter must know his prey. Paolo seconds Renato's rule. It's the same in acting for him. You must know your character, its past, and its inner workings. Renato garners their attention back to himself. He asks Marco what he knows about the girl. How old is she? What does she like to do? Marco doesn't know the answers to any of those questions. Renato suggests that they should take it slow and do some research first. Marco and Renato get to the university, camera in hand. The girl is indeed a splendid work of God. If all women looked like her, Renato would have lost his job. Marco has picked the finest of them all. They learn that the girl, Stefania, is getting a PhD in French literature. Her father's a big Parisian entrepreneur. She's filthy rich. Her passions and interests include gardening, art, dancing, cooking, kite surfing, and above all, tennis. She's also involved in social work, takes good care of herself, only the best day spas, organic and natural everything. Truly a tragedy for Marco, who hates tennis and shaves once a week. To summarize, she's sophisticated, the unattainable exact opposite, and totally out of Marco's reach. But it's nothing to worry about. If anything, it is a testament to Marco's ambition. Like father, like son. They aim high. Renato's plan is as follows. They know that she doesn't drive to school. She takes a bus since she's an environmentalist. Marco will be standing there at the station with a broken leg. Since she's charitable, she'll help him board the bus. Once on board, Marco will tell her that he hurt his leg while playing tennis, his greatest passion. She'll obviously share that she loves playing tennis too. Marco can go on to say that he must have seen her somewhere, because she looks familiar. At university maybe, where he studies astrophysics. Stefania would answer that she studies literature there. Marco could answer by expressing his own adoration for literature, especially French poetry. Once she takes the bait, Marco's free to talk about anything, from the stars to tennis. It's a great plan. But there's just one small hitch. Marco will have to learn each and every rule for playing tennis. Well, didn't Renato tell him learning to play tennis was important in life? That night, Marco stays up late, studying tennis. It's such a drag to him. With his head in hands, he is flipping through the pages when Renato walks into his room. He had been enjoying some late-night anecdote sessions with Marco's friends, and had just stopped by to say a quick goodbye before he left. He spots a photo of Marco's mom on his nightstand. She was about his age in that photo, he reminisces. He had fallen fast and hard for her, and couldn't eat or sleep. He sighs then, gives Marco a long glance of yearning. He hadn't been in touch with him much for the past few years, but he holds Marco's face in his hands now and wishes him good luck for the next day. The next day, Marco stands at the bus station, foot in a brace and all, but his predicament goes unnoticed by Stefania. Instead, he is helped aboard the bus by a group of very insistent young children scouts. Annoyed, he makes his way through the crowded bus to where Stefania stands, talking to an old lady. A jerk in the ride makes him accidentally bump into her, and Stefania isn't pleased by it. Just then, the ticket master comes up to them, checking their tickets, and Stefania notices that her wallet has gone missing. She accuses Marco of stealing it, saying that she has noticed him following her around everywhere for the last few days. The old lady testifies to seeing Marco put his hand in Stefania's purse. This is not how he thought this situation would go, Marco thinks as the crowd pushes in on him to return Stefania's wallet. With no other option left, Marco steps off at the first stop and runs away, only to be caught by the police this time. They caught the real thief later though, and let Marco go home. It was the old woman who had testified against him on the bus. The officer at the police station advises him not to run away the next time he's wrongly charged. The next day, Renato takes Marco to dinner at a fancy restaurant, and he says he has a surprise for Marco. A physics professor, Professor Michelini, was Renato's good friend, and he invited him to dinner so that Marco can work with the professor when he graduates. No. Mary was right. He should have told his father that he's dropped out of college. Professor Michelini greets Renato with a hug as they sit at the table for dinner. Renato tells Marco that the professor's wife had been his patient. When Michelini asks Marco about the topic for his thesis, Marco excuses himself away to the restroom. Renato explains that Marco's always been this way, sensitive. Meanwhile, Marco sets off in search of a computer he could use, and the receptionist at the restaurant lets him use hers. He quickly Googles topics for the thesis. Dark matter interests him. The invisible trace of the birth of the universe. Renato finds him there, asking what he was doing there. Michelini and his wife await him for dinner. When Michelini asks Marco the reason behind his passion for science, Marco satisfies him with an extensive answer this time. He tells him that his passion started with an existential crisis. Who is he? A speck of dust on a small world, lost in a universe full of mysteries like dark matter, the invisible trace of the birth of the universe. He never ceases to be amazed by this, because of the ability to develop a passion like we do as children, but then let it fade away. That's the passion that keeps us human, that keeps us alive. Michelini finds Marco's monologue very impressive. Dark matter is of topical interest to him. Renato is impressed too, which is an uncommon appearance with regard to Marco. Later that evening, Marco scampers before the police station, waiting for Stefania to show up there to collect her wallet. She finally arrives. Surprised to see him there, she asks what he was doing. Marco tells her that he was there to get some paperwork done. Stefania apologizes for causing all that mess. Marco reassures her about no hurt feelings. She didn't know him, and he could have been a nutcase, although he hasn't been stalking her, that he can say for sure. She notices that his leg was doing better, and Marco suddenly remembers the brace that he'd forgotten to put on before coming. Stefania felt terrible for making him run with an injured leg. She asks how he'd gotten the injury. Marco knows how to answer that. He got that injury while playing tennis. Years of playing have taken their toll. Stefania is pleasantly surprised. She plays tennis too. Marco couldn't believe the coincidence. She offers to make it up to him by inviting him to her sports club, buying him a drink, and playing a match. Things seem to finally be falling into place. Marco accepts her invitation. At the club, Marco prepares for a pumped face-off with Stefania. As she serves the first shot, Marco feigns a twist of his ankle and drops to the ground. He tells her that his injured leg is hurting again. Maybe it's too soon to try again. Or maybe he could never try again. This could be the end of tennis for him. Stefania finds it extremely sad, because she was thinking about inviting him to the tournament happening next month. Marco leans on her as they hobble to the seating area. They engage in small talk. Marco tells her about his passion for astrophysics. He asks her about her interests, and she tells him everything that he already knows. She tells him that she's now holding a seminar on French poetry. Marco quotes de Ricard, then. Stefania finds it unbelievable that he knows Louis de Ricard. Marco had discovered him about a year ago and immediately fell in love. He likes to browse a few of his pages every night before bed. As he is absorbed in conversation with Stefania, a waitress accidentally spills hot tea over his shoulder. She apologizes profusely in Chinese. As an impulse, Marco answers her apology in the same language. The manager shows up and reprimands her, telling them that she has been an utter nuisance, after merely 2 days at work. Marco takes the blame then. He tells the manager it was his mistake that led to the accident, saving the girl's job. Once the two of them are gone, Stefania asks him if he spoke Chinese. Marco had studied it when he was a child. She tells him it was sweet what he did, helping the girl from losing her job. Lucia greets him from behind. This day has started to go downhill really quickly. As Marco turns to face her, the little girl asks him why he didn't show up that Monday. Marco makes up some story, and Lucia's mother gets the cue and takes her away, telling her to leave Marco in peace then. Turning back to Stefania, Marco explains that Lucia is a girl at a foster home where he volunteers once a week. She gets a call then, reminding her of somewhere that she needed to be. She hurriedly takes her leave, pointing out that she enjoyed chatting with Marco and would love to do that again sometime. She then extends an invitation to her birthday party, and they exchange numbers. At dinner that night, Marco spills the news to Renato and his friends. As cool as it was to have the invite to Stefania's birthday party, Renato tells Marco that it is crucial to bring rule number 5 into play here. The first date must be absolutely unforgettable. That is when a woman decides if a man is right for her. That first night, the wall that divides two people must fall, and that magical energy called intimacy must blossom. The first thing to do is to listen to her. Anything that she says to Marco is important. Talk to her as if he's known her for years, as if only she understands him. Next, look straight into her eyes, but don't overdo it. Throw the rock and hide the hand, letting her feel uncertain. And above all, find any way he can to touch her. A gentle brush of his arm against hers, as he gets something off the table, caressing her face to squat away an errant mosquito. Marco points out that it all seems very fake. Renato counters that he should perceive it as well-studied instead. Renato drives Marco to Stefania's birthday party. He has Ivan and Paolo tagging along for support. Carrying her gift, a telescope, Marco knocks at her door. Stefania answers it herself, clad in ivory lace lingerie. Seeing the shock on the guys' faces, Stefania explains that she forgot to mention the party was lingerie-themed. Once inside, she welcomes them to proceed with food and drinks, then she's off. Marco feels uneasy. Paolo and Ivan, on the other hand, are quick to blend in. The three of them decide to take their pants off to get by the themed party. Even after some time of aimless dancing, Marco is not feeling in tune with the party. He wanders off in search of a bathroom and stumbles upon an intimate embrace between Stefania and some other guy. She jumps away from him and awkwardly introduces Marco to her friend Eder from the sports club. Marco apologizes, saying that he was only searching for a bathroom. Dismayed, Marco walks back to the party downing a couple of drinks. A commotion over the birthday cake draws his attention. Stefania has been asking Eder and some other friends to get rid of the marijuana cake that they'd brought. She categorically denies cutting it, as someone might react badly. They weren't listening though, and Marco felt a sudden rush of protective energy. He tries to grab it out of Eder's hand, and they wrestle with it, making it fly and land over the edge of the premises. It lands on a police vehicle. Safe to say, the party is off after that. As they return home, accompanied by Renato, Marco washes his hands off Renato and his 10 rules. He now has to compete for Stefania's affection. He's had enough. Renato brings him back to the subject that matters. The other guy, according to Marco, is some mix of Brad Pitt and some kind of prince. They get to Marco's apartment. Renato explains to Marco about women and their sixth sense. Like animals, they can sense fear. And Marco lacks self-confidence. For all his talk about making a woman fall in love, Marco couldn't understand why Renato gave up on his mother. Did he fall out of love? Renato tells him that is farthest from the truth. He never stopped loving her. But after all that Renato has put her through, she would never believe anything that he tells her. And now she's marrying that doofus. He asks Marco to talk to her on his behalf. Marco does not want to get involved. He snaps that maybe for once, Renato should try being sincere and tell her how he feels without any nonsense. When he gets back to his apartment, Marco finds Mary sitting at the kitchen table, flipping pages of a magazine. She's obviously upset about something. On Marco's probing, she replies that he's not the only one with ill-fated love. Mary was in love. Marco lists through the names of her latest conquests, but spots her eyeing the magazine that she was flipping through. Only it isn't a magazine. It's Paolo's photo novel. Mary is in love with Paolo. After the shock wears off, Marco asks Mary what the problem is. She's afraid to be turned down. Marco assures him that Paolo is absolutely crazy about her. Mary isn't convinced. She fears it would end in heartbreak. The next morning, when Renato visits Marco's apartment, he finds his friend straining to stop him from calling Stefania. Renato agrees he cannot call her. Rule number 6, never be the first to call the day after. But Marco is certain Stefania will never call him after last night's debacle. Renato distracts him with a piece of good news he's brought. His friend, Professor Michelini, was so impressed by Marco that he wants to help him finish his thesis. His cell phone rings then. Stefania is calling. She wants to know if he is busy tonight. Marco apologizes for last night's incident, but Stefania is hearing none of it. If anything, she's grateful that Marco stood up for her. She wants to know his plans for the meteorite shower that weekend, since she is planning on going to the countryside to watch it. Eder has come up with the idea, along with some of his friends. Upon hearing Eder's name, Marco is not very keen on the adventure, but he won't let any chance to be with her pass by. She warns him that it will be a no-frills outing, just tense. Marco boasts that he's good with savage adventures. In fact, his father calls him Tarzan for his survival skills. She tells him to pick her up at 11. While shopping for camping supplies the next day, Marco asks Paolo if he had noticed Mary being off for the past few days. Paolo says he noticed that she sleeps around a lot. Marco points out that he feels she does that because she's looking for the right man to be with. Paolo pays no heed to it, continuing to make light of the topic. Marco picks Stefania up from her house. She's brought along the telescope that Marco has gifted her. They get to the spot Eder has selected. He is there already, settled in with his tent in place. The clearing is a large expanse of grass, with trees fringing it from all sides. Stefania runs up to greet Eder with a hug. There is no other soul in sight. When Stefania asks Eder about it, he answers that they all bailed, so it would just mean some quality time for the two of them. Marco walks up to them, so Stefania introduces Eder to him, and explains that Marco, being the expert on stars, is here to decipher the meteorite for them. While Marco sets up his tent, which is juvenile in comparison to Eder's high-functioning one, Eder draws him to his side and orders him to leave Stefania alone. He's been working on her for 3 months. Later in the evening, the bonfire that Marco has started suddenly catches onto his tent, setting it up in flames. Stefania rushes towards a nearby lake, bucket in hand. It's pitch dark by then, and she skids and falls over the edge down into the chilly lake. Marco and Eder get to her rescue. Marco drops one end of a rescue rope into the lake and ties the other to his car. But the car is dead. Eder, scared as he is, does not wait to jump in then. Somehow, Stefania and Eder climb up the hill with the help of the rope. Marco sprains his ankle in the process. After wrapping his ankle and settling him by the fire, Stefania sets up the telescope, and Eder accompanies her on the picnic blanket. Stefania thanks him for his brave act of jumping in after her. They gaze at the stars, cuddled up together. The next morning, Eder tows Marco's car as they head back home. They make a stop for lunch and find a moment alone. Eder thanks Marco. They'd gotten off on the wrong foot, but after last night, with Stefania firmly by her side, he's willing to form a friendship with Marco. After all, if he hadn't messed things up that way last night, Stefania would never have gotten closer to Eder. Marco's world is spinning out of control, and there's nothing he could do to stop its orbit. He could only think of one thing to do. Marco visits his father at his facility. Renato's last patient is all patched up, and he'd be leaving the next day. Marco tells him what has happened over the weekend. Stefania is in love now. She doesn't view Eder as a man. She views him as the man who swims like Tarzan, writes like Dante, and heals like Dr. House. Marco feels like it's pointless now. He then divulges his secret to him. He had dropped out of college 2 years ago. He apologizes for causing this disappointment. He knows Renato had other plans for him. Renato isn't ready to give up just yet. The next day, he visits Marco's apartment with a renewed plan. Marco is surprised to see him. He thought he'd be long gone by then. But Renato is there to stay and stick it to that meddling imbecile, Eder. As per the plan, Mary finds Eder at the sports club and entices him into teaching her. Men like Eder never pass on a chance, and neither does he. Eder takes Mary to his apartment that afternoon, and Mary successfully seduces him. A little weed from Ivan's collection helps to knock him out. Once he's out, Mary searches his apartment for anything useful. She finds a USB drive. Mary gets back to her apartment and shares what she's found with the group. It's a drive full of pictures of women, all arranged in accordance with types, ages, and ratings in neat files. They've got enough. This time, Marco won't fail. Moving on with step 2 of the plan, Paolo writes emails to all of the girls present in the drive, inviting them to the tennis tournament happening at his sports club that weekend. They all arrive. Each one of them, the group notes as they watch from a balcony. As the women surround Eder confront him about his invitation, Stefania is flummoxed. Paolo cuts in amongst the crowd, throwing in a punch for sleeping with his girl. This wasn't part of the plan. It comes as a pleasant surprise for Mary. With great trouble, Eder manages to get them to a reception hall. He finds a mic there and tries to take control with his flattering words. He takes responsibility for making mistakes and hurting so many of the women present there. But he's a new man now, thanks to Stefania. He wanted all the women in her life to be here, to tell them that thanks to her, he now knows what real love is. And as of today, his heart will only belong to Stefania. It is a splendid move. Smooth as butter. The women hesitantly applaud. Eder receives a call then. He moves toward the back of the room into an announcement cabin. Luck is not on his side though. The mic in there is turned on, and as Eder relays the situation outside to a friend, everyone on the premises of the club can hear his farce. Stefania is humiliated. That evening, Marco calls Stefania a couple of times. It goes to voicemail. He leaves a message, saying he's there if she needs anything or anyone to talk to. A few days later, Stefania visits Marco at the daycare. She hands him a notebook. It's Marco's diary. Someone had mailed it to her for perusal, and she had read it all. She apologizes, saying that if she had looked past his appearance, Marco wouldn't have needed to get on with the charade. And maybe things would have gone differently between them. She's off to Paris, needing some time alone. Marco kisses Stefania. He should have done it sooner. He asks her if it was too late. Shaking her head, Stefania pulls him in for another kiss.